We're going to get into something that really defined music culture for generations, and that's the rock album cover. I mean, why did this simple piece of cardboard suddenly become, a famous art form?
It's a fantastic question because for the first few decades of recorded music, it just wasn't art at
To
all.
use protection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd buy these big, fragile vinyl records, and they'd come in these, well, boring brown or white paper sleeves, purely functional.
So they just blended in on the shelves. Not a very exciting shopping experience.
Not at all. But here's where it all changes. In 1939, you've got this graphic designer, Alex Steinweiss, working for Columbia Records. He looks at that plain sleeve and sees something more,
An opportunity.
a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
He designed the very first artistic cover, and just like that, he turned a piece of packaging into a creative canvas.
And the interesting thing here is that this wasn't just about making things look prettier. This was a business move.
Oh, a massive one. It was a revolution in marketing, really, those first artistic covers. They caused record sales to increase by over 800% in some categories.
800%. That is just unbelievable.
It is. And it proved right then and there that how the music looked was absolutely critical to its success. The sleeve became the most important ad for the music inside.
So that's way back in 1939. But the real rock and roll revolution in album art that didn't really kick off until the 60s.
Right. And for that, you could pretty much thank the Beatles. They're the ones who took the idea and just ran with it. They made the cover a cultural centerpiece.
Okay, so let's use them as a case study. Let's start with Ft. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's the definition of complex.
Absolutely. It was a massive, really expensive project. It's not just a photo of the band. They're standing in front of this huge collage of cutouts. Famous people, historical figures, writers.
And that wasn't just for looks, was it? It was an event.
It was. I mean, they had to get legal permissions for every single person on there. And fans would just stare at the cover for hours trying to identify everyone. It made the whole album feel like this huge, important piece of art.
You had to engage with the cover to get the full experience. But then, almost right after that, they did a complete 180 with Abbey Road.
And that's the genius of it. Abbey Road is maybe even more iconic, but it's just so simple. It's a single photograph of them walking across the street in London.
And it doesn't even have the band's name on the front.
Exactly. It proved you didn't need complexity. Its power was in its simplicity. It's one of the most imitated images in history, all from one casual photo.
So if the Beatles were all about complexity versus simplicity, where does a band like Pink Floyd fit in? They were all about mystery.
Yeah, Pink Floyd famously avoided putting their own faces on their covers. They wanted the art to represent the themes of the music. It was for fans who wanted, a bit of a puzzle.
Like the dark side of the moon.
The perfect example. Just a simple, clean image of a glass prism turning a beam of light into a rainbow.
It's so iconic, but it also perfectly captures that kind of experimental, complex sound of the album.
It does. And that cover, along with a lot of others, was created by a design studio called Hypnosis. Their whole thing was this kind of surreal, conceptual photography.
They didn't want to sell the band, they wanted to sell the idea of the record.
Precisely. And they could take it to some strange places. Think about their cover for the album Animals.
The flying pig.
The giant inflatable pig flying over a London power station. It's surreal, it's weird, and it forces you to think, what does this image have to do with the music? It made fans feel like they were in on a secret.
It seems like that kind of conceptual art requires a lot of thought from the listener, but what about bands who just wanted to look like rock stars?
Well, that's where photography really becomes the essential tool. A single photo can tell a whole story about the musician's personality or the mood of the album.
And you started to see two really different styles emerge, right?
Yes. On the one hand, you got these gritty black and white photos. They were meant to show the music was serious, raw, maybe a little dangerous.
And on the other,
You had the total opposite. Glossy, polished, full-color portraits that made the musicians look like glamorous movie stars.
yeah.
That was huge for the big pop and arena rock acts.
And the people taking these photos, like Annie Leibovitz, became famous in their own right. This wasn't just a quick snapshot.
Oh, no. These were meticulously planned. Creative directors would map out the lighting, the setting, the clothes, everything. A great photo made you feel like you had a personal connection to the artist.
But a photo is just one part of it. For a band to really last, they needed a symbol, a brand. Which brings us to logos.
Logos are everything for a long-term identity. They needed something that could represent the entire band in one single image. And the best example has to be the Rolling Stones.
Of course. the mouth with the red tongue sticking
If
out.
you see that anywhere in the world, you know exactly what it is. It's just brilliant branding. It
Mm-hmm.
perfectly captured that rebellious, energetic vibe.
And you can put it on anything. T-shirts, hats, posters.
That's the key. Scalability.
Hmm.
Graphic designers were hired to make sure these logos looked good, whether they were tiny on a patch or huge on a concert banner. A strong logo helps you build an identity that lasts for decades.
Okay, so let's jump back to the art styles themselves because they were always changing with the culture. Let's start in the late 60s with psychedelic art.
Right. This style was a direct product of the counterculture. It was all about social change, experimentation, and it looked like it.
Intense colors, swirling patterns.
Exactly. Vibrating colors. The whole point was to kind of mimic a certain altered state of mind. They used these bright neon pinks, greens, and yellows to just grab your attention.
And the lettering was often impossible to read.
That was intentional. The visual confusion was part of the message. It was about freedom, about breaking the rules of traditional design.
So you go from that wild, colorful chaos to, well, something very different in the 70s and 80s, heavy metal art.
A completely different universe. Metal bands wanted their art to look powerful, intense. So you see a lot of fantasy characters, monsters, epic battle scenes. The goal was to look a little bit scary.
And this is where you get the idea of a band mascot, like Iron Maiden zombie Eddie.
Yes, Eddie is on every single one of their records in a different scenario each time. The artists used airbrushing to get these super detailed, almost comic book style scenes. It helped define metal as its own world, totally separate from mainstream pop.
But just when metal art was getting super polished and complicated, another movement came along to tear it all down.
Punk.
Yeah.
The punk movement in the late 70s was a total reaction against all of that expensive, glossy art.
It was all about DIY, do it yourself.
It really was. The covers were designed to look cheap, messy, and urgent. It was an artistic statement that was also, an economic one.
You'd see cutout letters from newspapers like a ransom note.
Exactly. Or these grainy, high-contrast black and white photos that look like they'd just been run through a copy machine. The message was clear. You don't need to be a professional artist to create something powerful. It made the music feel immediate, accessible to everyone.
And then finally, there's the art that doesn't really fit in any of those boxes, the more surreal, conceptual stuff.
Right. This is when you see ordinary things in strange situations. Like a businessman on fire shaking hands with someone. These images were designed to make you stop and think.
And that style really fit with the more experimental, progressive rock bands whose music was also trying to push boundaries.
For sure. And a lot of those covers are now considered fine art. You'll see them in galleries. And of course, all of this was designed for the big 12-inch format of a vinyl record.
It was a physical experience. You weren't just streaming a file. You were holding this big piece of art.
And many of them came in gatefold sleeves, covers that opened up like a book. So that immediately doubled the space you had for artwork. You could have a whole mural inside.
Plus all the extras, the lyrics, posters, stickers, little booklets.
Yeah, buying a record was an interactive event. That physical package was a huge part of being a fan, which is why collectors today value albums that still have all those original inserts.
But that whole physical experience, especially the size of the art, it hit a wall in the 1980s.
It did. The compact disc, the CD. When music moved to that format, the artwork just shrank.
From a 12-inch square down to 5 inches.
And artists hated it. All those beautiful, detailed paintings were now tiny. It was almost impossible to see all the work that went into them. Designers had to completely change their approach.
No more tiny details. It had to be simple, bold graphics that worked small.
Right. And the lyrics and notes were crammed into these tiny booklets you could barely read. That shift really changed how people interacted with the art. As digital music took over, the physical cover just started to fade in importance.
So what does all this mean for us today, when almost all music is just on our phones?
Well, the album art is still incredibly important. It's the first thing you see on your screen. It's the visual identity for the song or album, and it sets the mood instantly.
And we're seeing a huge vinyl revival now.
We are. And people aren't just buying records to listen to them. They're buying them to own that large piece of art, to display it. It just proves that music and visual design will always work together to create culture.
The history really shows that we value music just as much for the visual story it tells as for the sound itself. It's a permanent reminder of that creative spirit.
So now that the album cover is just a tiny square on your phone, has streaming fundamentally killed the idea of music as a deeply interactive, collectible art form? Something to think about. Good luck with your studies.